Billy Embody covers recruiting, covers basketball, covers football, covers all of it for Geaux 247. Tremendous team over there with Geaux 247. You know that Shay is routinely here. We talked to Sonny Ship earlier this week. Sonny's over there with Geaux, and of course Billy Embody is there as well. You can follow him on Twitter at Billy Embody. They've also got a new hire over there. Matt Brune is doing really good work for Geaux 247. Bill, good morning. How are you, buddy?
Doing well, Jordy. How about you?
Doing good, man. Doing good.
I'm hungry after that read there.
I got you a gift card to A-Bears, so it's all good. A lot of people talking about Stingley and Eli Ricks. We heard from Eli Ricks yesterday for the first time since he's been at LSU. It was his first interview, I believe. They sat down with the press. Billy, you covered both of these guys in recruiting and have covered them throughout their first couple of seasons in Baton Rouge. What do you anticipate from these two guys on the corner this year?
Yeah, I mean, if both are healthy, which I think they will be, I mean, judging from what we've heard, and you just got to get these guys to game day. And you saw last year what Derek Stingley did when he pretty much played all year hurt, from what he told us at media days. He just struggled with this, struggled with that, and battled through it, and it was a tough year emotionally, and he still is one of, if not the best corner in the country. I mean, that's just who he is. Eli Ricks, same way. I mean, he's made plays start to finish, from the start of his high school career at Modern Day to when he went to, IMG until now. And so it's really no surprise to see these guys doing what they've done in their careers. It's funny, we got to hear from Eli Ricks for the first time this week, like you said. The last time I talked to him was at the All-American Bowl in San Antonio, where he was sitting out. He had gotten that shoulder surgery or was about to get it, the one that kept him out of his first spring. And he was just so mature. I mean, knew going to LSU was, a decision that was all about getting him to the next level, working with Corey Raymond, who did a great job, on that recruitment. His family's all in there. He committed on Christmas. And actually I remember we didn't really get too much of a heads up that it was happening. I remember just, in your shorts, with your fam or whatever, and I'm sitting over there in the corner writing about, 5-star corner committing to LSU. So he's been on the radar just as long as, Derek Stingley has been with LSU. And just seeing them now get the opportunity to play together, I think it's going to be, and not that they didn't last year, but to really do it for one last go with Stingley heading off to the league after this year, it's going to be special. I think if they're both healthy, they're going to be elite.
I know you don't make a hire for individual players, but how much has Durante Jones and his background as an NFL defensive backs guy benefited this immediate crew for LSU, being that they're so talented in the defensive backfield?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we'll see what happens with Durante Jones as far as play caller, as far as coordinating. That's something that I think you got to see on the field right away. And I do think he's going to be very good. And here's why. I mean, everyone I've talked to has just raved about how sharp he is. He's just got a tremendous mind for the game, and it makes sense with all the people that, signed off on him to Ed Ogeron while he was going through the process of, figuring out who the defensive coordinator is going to be. And once we all kind of dove into researching Durante Jones when he was the hire, you look at the people that signed off on him, and it's impressive. And from talking with different people, whether it be, players or coaches or whoever, they've been more than impressed with what he's brought to the table, just from being a defensive mind, connecting with the players. And I think that's so important these days, especially after the last year or so, not just at LSU, but just in general with everything going on. Being able to connect with players will get even more out of them for you. And he does that really, really well. As a recruiter, I think he's continuing to cut his teeth and get back into that side of things. But his connections and how he connects with players is always a positive. And that's what stands out about him to me so far. And just the way he thinks the game in the meeting rooms is something that I've heard has been really impressive. So I think it's going to turn out to be a terrific hire. It was, under the radar. It obviously was a long, winding road to get to Durante Jones. But, I mean, it's the spring and summer buzz, but it really has been positive around him.
You mentioned Durante Jones, and this same question goes for Jake Peets. I think this has kind of gone under the radar, but neither one of these coaches has called plays in a game Is there any concern from that front where then when the bullets start flying and the game gets live that they might, I don't want to say lock up, but that there might be a learning curve in that regard?
I think there is a little bit of a learning curve, just more so from getting into the flow of the game and balancing, the analytics of, especially offensively, with analytics being such a big part of that now, balancing the analytics part of play calling versus, being in the flow of a game and adjusting and making tweaks. And I mean, look, Joe Brady, never called a play in his life before he got to LSU and called the majority of the plays. And I think, he did a terrific job of that, obviously. And Jake Peetz, spent a year under him in Carolina and brought back a lot of the things that, Joe Brady did. And he has DJ Mangus, who is Joe Brady's right-hand guy. And Joe Brady made adjustments on the fly. I mean, there are plays that you can look back at, and I'd really have to jog memory to get back to 2019 all of a sudden. But you go back to some of those plays in particular games where they just kind of teed them up all game. Teed them up. The zone read against Alabama when Burrow pulled it stands out to me. They just kind of teed up some of those plays all game in the passing game too, and in other situations. And if you talk to Joe after the game, he'll tell you, "Yep, we were just kind of waiting, teeing that one up." And that's the key. That's key to being a good play caller. Some things might not make sense maybe as you're watching them in the game, but then when you look back and they hit the big one, or they hit the big 2 or 3 or 4 big plays like we saw in 2019 that they seem to do every game, that's where it stands out as far as being a play caller. So I think there's concern, but they do have a chance, once they get past UCLA, to kind of settle in and really get their routine and their flow and their communication down too.
Still, to me, the most beautiful play call of 2019. Third quarter, Alabama, Burrow fakes the give to Edwards-Helaire, fakes the quarterback draw that he had run effectively up to that point, pulls it, stands up straight and hits Jamar Chase on that little skinny post where he gains and flips the field after Alabama had kind of robbed the momentum of LSU in the third quarter. That was one of the most beautiful play calls I've ever seen, and timely.
Only ran it once.
Timely play calls. Billy Embody, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and those were things that we didn't, see. I mean, you saw a lot of RPO in that 2019 season, and we're going to see a lot of it again this year. But having the little nuances of that offense, where I think, obviously they're elite players all over the place on that offense, but the little nuances like that, the fake, quarterback run into a pass and doing those things where, it wasn't necessarily on tape all the time, and defenses kind of forgot about it. Forgot about Clyde Edwards-Helaire running the wheel, he, at the end of that half for the touchdown, little things that they kind of kept in their back pocket, I think, is what we're going to see more so with this offense that we saw in 2020.
Gerald Jr. wants to know, who's watching on YouTube here on the Jordy Culotta Show channel, make sure that you are subscribed today, like, share, comment on the post. We appreciate that. Gerald has a question for Billy Embody in recruiting. Gerald asks, ask Billy his opinion on where Harold Perkins ends up.
Oh, Harold Perkins.
5-star linebacker. Yes.
5-star linebacker, the number 1 linebacker in the country out of Cy Park in Texas. I will say he's probably a coin flip right now between LSU and Texas A&M. I know Texas is continuing to try and stay in the race there, but I do think it's an LSU Texas A&M race at this point. And with a guy like him at this stage, if he's going to continue to drag it out, I would just call it a coin flip between the two right now. But he's been to both places about as much as you could want in the off season. He even camped at LSU, which is a great sign. Worked out with Blake Baker, so he got a chance to work with him in person. He's from New Orleans. He spends a lot of time in New Orleans training. He's somebody, honestly, that I could see at LSU, and I could see at Texas A&M.
Michael Chereen wants to know, ask Billy, because of the offensive line depth and the hits that they've taken over the past couple of days, would any of the defensive linemen be able to cross-train on the offensive line?
I think you could see some guys that could do that, but I don't see that happening. Joe Evans Joe Evans would be the one I guess you would circle just from the standpoint of he's done it. He's played offensive line, but I think he's a guy that's going to start for LSU. So I would be surprised if any of those guys can switch over and do it right now at this stage in camp. I think they're going to get Garrett Dellinger back at a reasonable time where he can still be in the rotation if guys go down during the season. Anthony Bradford will get back in the mix. Chason Hines, they want to get him healthy. I don't think you do anything too drastic right now as far as moving guys over. And I don't really think there's too many guys outside of Joe Evans who could flip over and do it, especially now that Eric Taylor entered the transfer portal. He was one that I had heard they at least discussed moving him to the offensive line, and he ended up just transferring out.
Coach O has made a lot of talk about the linebacker room and how they're almost four deep and they can almost pit crew these people in and out. Where do you see Mike Jones fitting in? Because he came in as a pretty heralded transfer portal guy, and it seems like they tried to shoehorn him in at middle linebacker, but he's one of these guys that you want to get out in space and let run with receivers. Do you know what exactly the plan is with Mike Jones? Because he seems to be too good to keep off the field.
Yeah, Mike Jones Jr. I think is just finding his way. He transferred in from Clemson. He's a smart guy. We talked to him earlier in camp, and he seems to be, in the right, mindset. And he comes from a program that obviously is used to winning as well, and they've built something really well under, Coach Venables there defensively, and so he's been coached well. But I think right now, Micah Baskerville and Damone Clark are really staking the claim to start together, and Mike Jones just needs a little bit more time. Bug Strong needs a little bit more time. Jared Small has had a tremendous camp, and so he's making an even bigger name for himself that he's built off of the spring. And I think we'll see him on the field. They do want to rotate guys a little bit, and they'll get his feet wet, and he's versatile. He wants to play in the box, but can also play in space. He played kind of Clemson's, do-it-all linebacker spot in Venables' defense, but right now, I just think he's continuing to kind of grasp things and adjust, and so I think he's somebody you're going to see in the rotation. Might not start right now.
Brandon Dixon wants to know, ask Billy about how's Pig Cage coming along?
Pig Cage is making some plays. I mean, I think with the safety spot, you're going to see Major Burns and Jay Ward back there is my bet. Todd Harris is going to play. That safety room is kind of all of a sudden filled with some depth. They've got Derek Davis Jr. had a real strong day last week. Jordan Tolles is in there. You've got Sage Ryan, Matthew Langlaw, all those guys. But, Pig Cage is a newcomer as well. So he's adjusting. But I heard he made some plays in camp that, certainly makes him look like one of the better walk-on guys that they brought in.
You mentioned the secondary and how that safety has turned into almost a position of strength. It makes me wonder, do you know what kind of a defense LSU is going to run out there? It doesn't seem to be the standard 4-3 when you talk about the linebackers and the amount of corners that they want to put on the field. Is there some sort of strategy there? Do you see like a 4-2-5, or is it going to be, kind of a mixed exotic scheme?
Yeah, I for sure. I think it's going to be a mixed scheme. You've got, college football offenses that are just running out receivers left and right, and that's something that you gotta bring corners with. And so I think they're going to be in nickel a lot. I think most defenses these days are playing that so much just because of the way offenses are. So I think you see Damone Clark, Micah Baskerville as the main linebackers, at least to start off, and then they'll kind of tweak things and see how things go. You'll have Stingley and Eli Ricks. You'll have Ward and Burns, and then Flott. And then, you want to see somebody emerge in the secondary as another playmaker that they could roll out there and, give some guys some snaps off and not have much of a drop-off.
What do you think the potential is for Cole Taylor this year? I've seen him at practice almost every single day. And the kid can play. He looks great. I know we all kind of get lost in the hype of the Jack Besh hybrid. We fall victim to that here, too. Kid can ball, but what do you think about Cole Taylor?
Yeah, I think Cole Taylor is he kind of reminds me a little bit of Foster Moreau, just being how big he is physically. I mean, he is a big dude. I think Foster's a little quicker than him, and Cole is still adjusting. And you got to remember, he is just a sophomore. It's kind of wild to think about when, he's now down in LSU lore basically with the shoe at Florida, but it's still just wild to think about. But he really is just somebody that I think is continuing to develop and come on. And you kind of heard Ed Ogeron talk about it a little bit last night, where he was saying how, just still adjusting to that physicality. I mean, he's still a young kid. He's not necessarily the best pass catcher on the team, but he's going to be out there. He's the starter. And yeah, you're right. He probably gets lost in the Jack Besh hype a little bit, who can catch the ball really well, make plays in the passing game, but who on the flip side, probably isn't going to be out there, as much, as a blocker, like being out there specifically to block. So, Cole Taylor brings something, I think, that's unique in the sense that he is so big. He is a huge target. He's got a big wingspan, but he's just got to, continue to just get better. I mean, he's just still so young and came up from a real small high school in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, and yeah, despite being attached to one of the most unique plays in LSU history, he's still a sophomore and still developing.
Billy, which one of these freshman wide receivers do you think plays first, and how talented of a group is this when you've now been able to see them on the field combined? Now, we've seen all the stars in recruiting, but now you see them in one drill together, and it's tough to pick out the one that's the best.
Yeah, it's tough to pick out the one that's the best, but I'm gonna say Brian Thomas Jr. is your first one that's off the bench or in the starting lineup, depending on how the rest of camp goes. Out of the freshmen, he's been too tough to guard, too athletic, too big. He brings that unique size that really a lot of the receiver room doesn't have this year, and he's earned it. He's somebody that came up as a junior and was dominant and rose up the recruiting rankings, and then as a senior, I think he had a little bit of tough luck with his situation quarterback wise at Walker, and just not being able to be as targeted and things like that. And so he kind of flew under the radar as a recruit because he took his process out pretty far, and instead, did that and then turned around and is making waves in fall camp. And he's been, everything we saw on his junior tape, that's what Brian Thomas Jr. has been in fall camp at LSU. So he's making a push to start. I think you look at the entire group and you got to see big things. Deion Smith, if he puts it all together, is going to be special. Chris Hilton is as explosive as an athlete as they probably have on the entire team. It's Malik Neighbors is as competitive as it gets. I mean, he can really, really, I think, despite being like a top 150 recruit, despite not playing his senior year of high school, he is flying under the radar because he didn't have that senior year. But gosh, he looks the part physically. He's competitive, athletically. He's one of the best, I think. So this whole group, it's special. It's I'm not going to tag it as Jamar Chase and Terrace Marshall, and those are just two of those guys. But it's a special group that really should hold LSU's passing game, not only together, but allow it to be one of the better ones in the SEC for the next couple of years.
You mentioned this freshman recruiting class, and it makes me think that A&M has kind of found their foothold in recruiting. It seems like LSU and A&M are going head-to-head for a lot of these battles. Has Jimbo finally found a little bit of his stride there at Texas A&M? Is that a power that LSU should be concerned with, not only on the recruiting front, but also when it comes to their day-in and day-out matchup every year?
Yeah, they are recruiting very well. They actually just landed one of the best tight ends in the country in the 2023 recruiting class. 2023, yes, 2023. And so they got him on board, Theodore Orstrom, who LSU was recruiting and had on campus. They really are starting to pick up steam for a lot of these guys early on in 2023 and 2022. They've been, starting to get rolling as well. They've got a top 10 recruiting class. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the country. They've got Bryce Anderson, who they beat out Texas for. They've got Malik Sila, who's one of the best defenders out of Katy. The thing for Texas A&M, is it seems like just being able to recruit quality offensive linemen, because they seem to kind of start, strong for some, and then, they don't necessarily finish as well. And that's where it's won in the SEC. There's, Damon Demas is a 5-star that they signed last cycle or maybe the cycle before, and he hasn't done too much. So development is, going to be something that people are going to want to see from some of these position groups that they're recruiting very well right now, but haven't really had too much to show for it. It's still only August. So if you look at like the crystal ball and things like that, Harold Perkins is crystal ball there. They are more than in the mix for some of these other prospects that are, also being recruited by LSU and others, but they've also got to finish. They can't crystal balls are great. And we've seen this, but from LSU time to time, you get crystal balls and everybody thinks things are going really well. But at the end of the day, where you finish is far more important than, momentum in the summer. And A&M is recruiting really well right now, but they've also got to, end up with this class that they have right now.
Billy Embody covers recruiting, covers football, basketball, 247 Sports. Great follow on Twitter at Billy Embody. Last one, I'll get you out of here. LSU basketball top 10 preseason going into the year, in your opinion?
In my poll, or do they in my poll?
Yes.
I don't know if I would slot them in the top 10, but I would slot them in the top 15. I mean, everything I heard this summer, if this team can stay healthy, I mean, Efton Reed is a dude. I mean, he's going to be fun to watch. Adam Miller, Xavier Pinson, even Eric Gaines is making a lot of strides. I think they could very well be adding one of their 2022 commits here into the 2021 class.
Ooh,
man.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
Give me a name.
Yeah.
Say his name.
We'll see if you guys don't tweet it out. But don't tweet it out. But I would think Justice Williams has a chance to reclassify and end up at LSU's campus. We've been hearing that for a couple of weeks, and time's ticking on that one. But that's something that we've heard. So we'll see if they can get him in, and he's a versatile guard that could provide something. So don't tweet that out. But for those listening to the show, I do think there's a chance that he ends up on campus.
Bill, have a great weekend. Thank you for the information this morning. We'll see you, man.
All right, fellas. Have a good one.
All right.